The escalating conflict between Israel and Iran, characterized by a series of increasingly deadly military strikes as of June 15, 2025, represents a critical juncture in the long-standing tensions between the two nations. This detailed analysis explores the recent developments, historical context, strategic motivations, regional and global implications, and potential future trajectories of this volatile situation, drawing on available information, including recent reports from credible sources. The topic is complex, rooted in decades of geopolitical rivalry, ideological differences, and proxy warfare, culminating in direct confrontations that have raised fears of a broader regional war. Background: the Israel-Iran rivalry. The enmity between Israel and Iran has deep historical and ideological roots, dating back to the 1979 Islamic Revolution in Iran. Prior to the revolution, Iran under Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi maintained relatively amicable relations with Israel, including cooperation in trade and security. However, the establishment of the Islamic Republic under Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini fundamentally altered this dynamic. The new regime adopted an anti-Israel stance, viewing the Jewish state as an illegitimate entity and a key adversary in its broader anti-Western, anti-imperialist ideology. Iran's support for groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, and other proxies across the Middle East has been a cornerstone of its strategy to counter Israel's regional influence. Israel, in turn, perceives Iran's nuclear ambitions, ballistic missile program, and regional proxy network as existential threats. This mutual hostility has fueled a shadow war, characterized by cyber attacks, assassinations, and covert operations, with occasional escalations into direct military confrontations. The recent wave of strikes, particularly those reported on June 13 to 15, 2025, marks a significant escalation from this shadow war into open conflict. Israeli airstrikes targeting Iranian nuclear and military infrastructure, followed by Iran's retaliatory ballistic missile attacks, have resulted in significant casualties and destruction, raising the stakes for both nations and their allies. Recent developments: the June 2025 escalation. Israeli strikes on Iran. On June 13, 2025, Israel launched a large-scale military operation targeting multiple sites in Iran, including facilities related to its nuclear program and military infrastructure. According to reports, Israeli fighter jets bombarded Tehran, striking experimental laboratories and fuel reservoirs, causing widespread destruction. The attacks were described as some of the most intense in the history of Israel-Iran hostilities, with explosions likened to an earthquake by local residents. Over 70 people were killed in Iran, including 6 senior Iranian security officials, marking a significant blow to Iran's military leadership. The Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, justified the strikes as a preemptive measure to neutralize Iran's nuclear capabilities and degrade its ability to support proxy groups like Hezbollah and Hamas. Israeli defense officials, speaking anonymously, confirmed that the targets included sites linked to Iran's nuclear program, which Israel has long viewed as a red line. The strikes also reportedly damaged Iran's air defenses, granting Israel greater operational freedom in subsequent operations. Iran's retaliation: Iran responded swiftly with a series of ballistic missile and drone attacks under its True Promise 3 campaign, targeting Israeli cities such as Tel Aviv, Ashdod, and Bat Yam. The first wave of attacks occurred on June 13, followed by a second wave on June 14, and a third on June 15. These strikes caused significant damage, destroying residential buildings in Tel Aviv and its suburb, Rishon LeZion, and resulting in at least 2 deaths and several injuries in Israel. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, claimed responsibility for the missile barrages, framing them as a response to Israeli savagery. The attacks were not only retaliatory but also aimed at demonstrating Iran's military reach and resolve. Hebrew media reported warnings that Haifa could be the next target, indicating Iran's intent to sustain pressure on Israel's civilian and military infrastructure. Immediate impact: the immediate aftermath of these strikes was devastating for both sides. In Iran, the destruction of fuel reservoirs and nuclear facilities disrupted critical infrastructure, while the loss of senior security officials weakened the IRGC's command structure. In Israel, missile strikes on urban centers like Tel Aviv caused civilian casualties and heightened public fear, with many residents spending sleepless nights under air raid sirens. The strikes underscored the vulnerability of both nations to long-range attacks, despite their advanced defense systems, such as Israel's Iron Dome and Iran's air defense networks. The escalation also had a profound psychological impact.
In Iran, pro-government supporters rallied in the streets to condemn Israel's actions, while in Israel, the government faced pressure to respond decisively to Iran's missile attacks. The cycle of retaliation has fueled a sense of inevitability about further escalation, with both sides signaling their readiness to continue the fight. Strategic motivations. Israel's objectives. Israel's strikes were driven by several strategic imperatives: neutralizing Iran's nuclear program. Israel has consistently maintained that a nuclear-armed Iran poses an existential threat. The targeting of nuclear-related facilities, including experimental laboratories, reflects Israel's determination to prevent Iran from advancing its nuclear capabilities, particularly in light of stalled international negotiations over the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, weakening Iran's regional influence, by targeting IRGC leadership. And military infrastructure. Israel aims to disrupt Iran's ability to support proxy groups like Hezbollah, which has been a significant threat along Israel's northern border with Lebanon, demonstrating military superiority. The scale and precision of Israel's airstrikes were intended to showcase its military capabilities and deter further Iranian aggression. The reported damage to Iran's air defenses suggests a strategic intent to maintain operational freedom for future strikes. Iran's objectives. Iran's retaliatory strikes were equally strategic, restoring deterrence. Iran's leadership, particularly the IRGC, views direct retaliation as essential to maintaining credibility. Failing to respond to Israel's strikes would signal weakness, both domestically and among its regional allies. Targeting Israeli infrastructure. By striking urban centers like Tel Aviv, Iran sought to impose a cost on Israel's civilian population, mirroring the disruption caused by Israeli strikes in Tehran. This tit-for-tat approach aims to deter further Israeli attacks by demonstrating Iran's ability to inflict pain. Rallying domestic support. The Islamic Republic often uses external conflicts to unify its population and deflect attention from internal challenges, such as economic difficulties and political dissent. The public rallies condemning Israel's attacks reflect this dynamic, historical context, a pattern of escalation. The June 2025 strikes are not an isolated event but part of a broader pattern of escalating confrontations between Israel and Iran. Key milestones in this rivalry include, 2000s, the shadow war intensifies. Israel is widely believed to have been behind the Stuxnet cyber attack, 2010, which targeted Iran's nuclear facilities, and the assassinations of several Iranian nuclear scientists. Iran, in turn, intensified its support for Hezbollah and Hamas, which clashed with Israel in conflicts like the 2006 Lebanon War and multiple Gaza wars. 2018-2024. Syria as a battleground. Israel conducted hundreds of airstrikes in Syria targeting Iranian-backed forces and weapons shipments destined for Hezbollah. Iran responded with drone and missile attacks, including a significant barrage in April 2024, which marked the first direct Iranian attack on Israeli soil. October 2024, crossing red lines. Israel strikes on Iranian air defenses in October 2024, which caused some damage, set the stage for the June 2025 escalation. Iran's confirmation of damage, despite initial claims of successful interceptions, highlighted its vulnerability to Israeli air power. Tanker war. 2024 reports of Israel targeting Iranian ships in the Red Sea and Mediterranean, followed by Iranian retaliation against Israeli vessels, indicate that the conflict had already expanded beyond traditional battlegrounds before June 2025. This history illustrates a gradual erosion of red lines that once constrained direct attacks. Both nations have increasingly engaged in overt operations, driven by a mutual perception that the other poses an immediate threat. Regional and global implications. Regional dynamics. The Israel-Iran conflict has significant implications for the Middle East. Lebanon and Hezbollah. Hezbollah, Iran's most powerful proxy, is likely to be drawn into the conflict, particularly if Israel continues to target Iranian assets. This could reignite fighting along Israel's northern border, potentially leading to a repeat of the 2006 Lebanon War. Syria, already a proxy battleground, could see intensified Israeli strikes on Iranian targets, further destabilizing the country. Gulf states, countries like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, which have normalized relations with Israel under the Abraham Accords, may face pressure to align with Israel against Iran. However, their own tensions with Iran could complicate their positions. Palestinian territories. Iran's support for Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad could lead to coordinated attacks on Israel from Gaza, escalating the conflict into a multi-front war. Global powers. The escalation risks drawing in major powers, particularly the United States and Russia. United States, as Israel's primary ally, the U.S. faces pressure to provide military and diplomatic support. However, the Biden administration, or its successor, depending on the 2024 election outcome, may be reluctant to engage directly in a regional war, given domestic political constraints and ongoing commitments in Ukraine. Russia, an ally of Iran, could provide military support, such as advanced air defense systems, to counter Israeli strikes. This would further complicate U.S.-Russia relations. China, a major buyer of Iranian oil, has a vested interest in preventing a broader conflict that could disrupt energy markets. Its diplomatic role could be pivotal in de-escalation efforts. Economic impact. The strikes have already disrupted critical infrastructure, such as Iran's fuel reservoirs, which could affect global oil prices. Continued attacks on energy facilities or shipping routes, e.g., the Strait of Hormuz, could lead to supply chain disruptions and economic instability. Military capabilities and tactics. Israel's military superiority is evident in its ability to conduct precise, long-range airstrikes deep within Iranian territory. The IDF's arsenal includes F-35 stealth fighters, advanced drones, and cyber warfare capabilities. The Iron Dome and other missile defense systems have mitigated, but not eliminated, the threat of Iranian ballistic missiles. Israel's intelligence capabilities, particularly through Mossad, have also played a critical role in identifying high-value targets, such as IRGC commanders and nuclear facilities. Iran's military strategy relies on its ballistic missile program, which includes missiles capable of reaching Israel, e.g., the Fateh-1 hypersonic missile. Its drone capabilities, demonstrated in attacks on Saudi oil facilities in 2019, have grown increasingly sophisticated. However, Iran's air defenses have proven vulnerable to Israeli strikes, and its conventional air force is outdated compared to Israel's. Iran compensates through its proxy network, which allows it to project power indirectly. Humanitarian and socio-political consequences. The human toll of the June 2025 strikes is significant. In Iran, the deaths of over 70 people, including civilians, and the destruction of residential areas have fueled anger and calls for revenge. In Israel, civilian casualties and damaged infrastructure have heightened public anxiety and pressure on the government to act decisively. Both nations face internal challenges. Iran. Economic sanctions, high inflation, and political dissent have already strained the regime's legitimacy. The strikes could galvanize public support for the government in the short term but exacerbate economic woes if infrastructure damage persists. Israel, domestic political divisions, particularly over Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's leadership, could complicate Israel's response. Public support for military action may wane if civilian casualties mount or if the conflict drags on. The humanitarian crisis extends beyond the immediate casualties. Displacement, disrupted access to food and fuel, and psychological trauma are likely to affect populations in both countries, particularly in urban centers like Tehran and Tel Aviv. Potential future trajectories. The trajectory of the Israel-Iran conflict depends on several factors. Escalation. Continued tit-for-tat strikes could lead to a full-scale war, potentially involving proxies and allies. The targeting of strategic assets, such as Iran's nuclear facilities or Israel's military bases, could trigger a broader conflict. De-escalation. Diplomatic intervention by global powers, such as the US, China, or the United Nations, could lead to a ceasefire. However, the erosion of red lines makes negotiations challenging. Stalemate. Both sides may opt for a period of restrained retaliation, focusing on rebuilding defenses and preparing for future confrontations. This scenario is likely if neither side achieves a decisive victory. The risk of miscalculation remains high. A misjudged strike or an unintended escalation, e.g., a missile hitting a densely populated area, could spiral into a wider war, drawing in regional and global actors. International responses and diplomacy. The international community has expressed alarm at the escalation. The United Nations Security Council is likely to convene to address the crisis, though divisions among permanent members, US, Russia, China, may prevent a unified response. The European Union, which has sought to revive the JCPOA, may push for renewed talks to de-escalate tensions, but Israel's distrust of Iran's intentions and Iran's insistence on retaliation complicate these efforts. Regional organizations, such as the Arab League, may issue statements condemning the violence, but their influence is limited. Turkey, a regional power with its own tensions with both Israel and Iran, could play a mediating role, though its alignment with NATO may constrain its actions. Conclusion: the Israel-Iran strikes of June 2025 represent a dangerous escalation in a decades-long rivalry, with profound implications for the Middle East and beyond. Driven by strategic imperatives, mutual distrust, and a history of proxy warfare, both nations have crossed thresholds that make de-escalation challenging. The involvement of global powers, the resilience of each side's military capabilities, and the potential for further civilian suffering will shape the conflict's trajectory. While the immediate focus is on military responses, the long-term resolution lies in addressing the root causes of the conflict, including Iran's nuclear ambitions, Israel's security concerns, and the broader regional power struggle. Without diplomatic intervention, the cycle of retaliation risks plunging the region into a wider war, with devastating consequences for all involved. This analysis, while comprehensive, is based on the latest available information as of June 15, 2025, and the situation remains fluid. For the most current developments, monitoring credible news sources and official statements from both nations is essential.